Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. On a quiet Arizona morning, Lucas thought his only challenge would be finishing his coffee before the sun rose. But when a ruthless HOA declares war on his private land, his peaceful life ignites into a wildfire of sabotage, surveillance, and revenge. It was around 7 in the morning when I stepped out onto my deck with a mug of black coffee and the quiet intention of doing absolutely nothing. The Arizona sun hadn't yet begun to bake the land, and the stillness over my backyard was damn near perfect, just the way I liked it. My pool shimmered like a sapphire mirror, the grill station gleamed after a weekend polish, and the hummingbirds danced near the bougainvillea I'd planted 2 years ago. This was my land, 2.5 acres of earned peace. I had just settled into my Adirondack chair when I caught movement by the back fence. At first, I thought it was a coyote or one of those overfed raccoons that occasionally tried to play chicken with my sprinklers. But no, 2 uniformed officers were walking up the gravel path like they were about to negotiate a hostage release. One had his hand near his holster, the other was already scanning my setup like I was building a cartel compound. "Morning, sir," the taller one called out, polite but clipped. "You Lucas Reynolds?" "Depends." "You planning to shoot me or sell me something?" I replied, rising slowly and setting my coffee on the rail. That didn't get a laugh. "We received a call about unauthorized use of a community pool," the short one said. "Apparently this structure," he motioned toward my very much private, very much expensive pool, "isn't registered to any HOA-approved facilities in the Sunridge Mesa community." My eyebrows nearly flew off my face. I let that silence sit for a second. "You mean this pool," I said, walking with them to the edge, "that I built 5 years ago, on my private land, with my private money, outside of any goddamn HOA borders?" "According to the report," the tall one interjected, flipping through something on his phone, "there's a boundary discrepancy. Says the land may fall under common HOA maintained space, based on cadastral records from 1996? I nearly choked. You know what else happened in 1996? I graduated high school and Backstreet Boys were still a thing. That doesn't mean I owe them rent either." They didn't laugh. I sighed, walked back into the house, and returned with my land deed, property lines, and the most beautiful, notarized site plan you've ever seen. When I laid it all out on the outdoor kitchen counter, even Officer Hand-on Holster looked impressed. They took photos, jotted down statements, and after a 10-minute awkward silence, politely backed off. "Thanks for your time, Mr. Reynolds," one said. "We'll make a note in the report." "Be sure to include the phrase, 'waste of my Tuesday morning,'" I grumbled, watching them disappear through the same gate they entered. But just when I thought the circus was over, a figure emerged from the far side of the fence. Flaxen bob haircut, oversized sunglasses, and a clipboard tucked under one arm like a damn warrant of righteousness. Karen Walcroft, president of the Sunridge Mesa HOA, my unofficial nemesis since the moment she moved into her stucco McMansion across the wash and decided her jurisdiction extended beyond reality. She didn't say hello. "That pool," she began, voice cold and rehearsed, "is situated across a line that, per our historical overlays, designates it as shared communal space. The 1996 cadastral surveys are not legally binding," I cut in. "Karen, I've shown the cops my paperwork. This land was purchased independently. I'm not in your HOA. I've never paid your dues, signed your rules, or attended your bake sale tribunal." Her lips curled. There was an anonymous complaint about excessive gatherings, loud music, open flames. Sunridge Mesa is committed to maintaining order. "Then maintain it over there," I said, pointing toward the cookie-cutter suburb she ruled like a Stepford warlord. She stepped closer to the fence. "Don't think you can hide behind a few outdated documents. The community is watching. And if you refuse to cooperate, we'll escalate." I smiled, not kindly. "Karen," I said, "the only thing escalating is your blood pressure." She stormed off without another word. Her heels crunched like brittle bones on gravel. I figured that would be the end of it. I figured wrong. 3 nights later, I was trimming the rosemary bush near my grill when something glinted under the leaves. At first, I thought it was a lost phone or a kid's toy, but when I pulled it free, it was a black weatherproof camera. No brand name, Wi-Fi capable, carefully zip-tied to a metal stake, with wires buried in the mulch. I froze. A sick sort of curiosity took over. I searched around the yard, flashlight in hand, and within 20 minutes I found two more, one near the pergola, another behind the outdoor shower, angled right at my deck chairs. Somebody had been here. I tore them all out, wrapped them in a towel, and drove straight to the sheriff's station. They took a report but didn't promise much. Unless we catch someone in the act or you've got footage, it's a gray area, the deputy mumbled, filing paperwork like it was a grocery list. I was halfway back home when I noticed my porch light flickering. Not blinking, flickering, like an electrical stutter. It had never done that before. The next morning, I brought out an electrician I trusted. He looked grim as he examined the poolside breaker box. "Lucas," he said, "someone's been in here. This isn't normal wear. Someone pulled a wire, rerouted the load, then tried to hide it with a patch job. Could have started a fire." I looked out at my backyard, my perfect handmade oasis, and for the first time, it didn't feel like mine. It felt like a war zone, and I didn't know it yet. But this was only the opening salvo. I didn't sleep much the night after the electrician's visit. I lay awake with the house dark and silent, staring out the window toward my backyard. Every creak in the walls, every rustle in the desert wind put me on edge. I hadn't felt this way since the job, those nights spent listening for groaning beams or panicked voices behind smoke. But this wasn't fire. This was quieter, colder, and it was happening on my turf. By morning, I had a plan. First thing, I drove down to the county land assessor's office, documents in hand, demanding an updated certificate confirming my property's boundaries and legal independence from any HOA jurisdiction. It took 3 hours, a grumpy bureaucrat, and 2 stale vending machine coffees, but I walked out of there with a sealed letter, an embossed survey map, and a signature so aggressive it looked like someone stabbed the paper, just the way I like my government support. Late, barely competent, but technically on my side. When I got back, I found a new surprise waiting. A small white envelope was stuck into the frame of my front gate. No stamp, no address, just the word caution typed in all caps across the front. Inside was a single photo, an overhead satellite image of my yard, outdated and grainy, but with red marker circles drawn around my pool, patio, and fire pit. Underneath was a scribbled line. "This is not forever yours." I'll admit it, my hand trembled a little. Not from fear, not yet, from the sheer weirdness of it all. Whoever was behind this wasn't just angry. They were methodical, creepy, strategic, and petty, of course. HOA grade petty. I called the sheriff's department again. They told me unless there was a direct threat or trespasser caught in the act, there wasn't much they could do. Probably just some disgruntled neighbor, the deputy said, as if that made it normal. I decided it was time to start playing offense. That evening, I installed my own cameras, high-res, motion-activated, and mounted high on the house exterior. 1 at the front, 2 watching the backyard, and a 4th that had a perfect view of the electrical box by the pool. I synced them all to a secure cloud account and checked the feeds every hour like a man babysitting a nuclear reactor. I wasn't going to let some HOA drone sneak onto my land again. But what I saw the next night changed everything. It was just after midnight when a motion alert pinged on my phone. I opened the app groggily and watched, in real time, as a figure in dark clothing slipped through the side gate like they owned the place. They wore gloves, a cap pulled low, and moved with the kind of purpose that said this wasn't their first trespass. The feed didn't catch a clear face, but it didn't have to. They headed straight for the pool breaker box, stopped, pulled something out of a backpack, looked like a screwdriver. They fiddled with the latch but seemed to hesitate when the sensor lights kicked on. Then they backed away and bolted out the same gate, leaving the box untouched. Whoever it was, they knew exactly where to go and what to do. The next morning, I walked the perimeter of the property again. That's when I noticed new footprints along the flower bed, and one of the sprinkler heads near the fence had been kicked off, bent awkwardly at an angle like someone had tripped on it. As I crouched to inspect the damage, I heard the unmistakable voice of Louise, my 70-something neighbor from across the wash, whose chihuahua barks like it's paid by the hour. "I saw someone over here last night," she said through the chain-link fence, arms crossed over her sun hat. "Didn't look like your type." I turned toward her. "Did you get a look at them?" "Not really. Tall, black hoodie. Might have come from Sunridge." Her lips tightened. "Yesterday, some HOA fella came by asking if I'd file a complaint about your nighttime pool parties. Told him to go pound sand." I blinked. "Wait, Someone from the HOA knocked on your door? Yeah, had a clipboard. Said he was from the compliance committee. Tried to tell me that your yard was classified as an open community use area. Can you believe that? She squinted at me. They really hate that you're not in their little kingdom, don't they? I sighed. You have no idea. Back inside, I reviewed the footage again. Froze it on the moment the intruder approached the box. I zoomed in on their backpack. There was a patch on the strap. HOA Sunridge Mesa Security Patrol. It wasn't clear, but it was enough for me. That afternoon, I submitted the video to the sheriff's office as part of a formal trespassing complaint. They filed it, but warned me again that without a positive ID, prosecution would be tough. Still, I wasn't just filing complaints anymore. I was documenting everything, every broken fixture, every suspicious shadow. Every time Karen and her little army of beige suburban commandos looked in my direction. I also started getting weird notes in the HOA's neighborhood app. Yeah, they had one, and yeah, I had a burner account. Posts started popping up about non-compliant properties nearby and uncooperative landowners jeopardizing the community's standards. One post read, if someone's backyard becomes a nightly gathering spot and that spot exists in the spirit of community zoning, shouldn't it follow community rules? I didn't comment, but I bookmarked that shit. The final straw of the week came when I got a letter from the HOA, not addressed to me personally, but slipped under my door like some passive-aggressive curse. It was a notice of concern citing numerous observations from community safety officers about potential code violations on shared-use land adjacent to HOA boundaries. They weren't backing down. They were escalating. It was a Saturday night, the kind where the stars burn a little clearer and the air pretends it might not turn into an oven by noon. I had family over. My brother Sam and his kids were in town, and we'd spent the day grilling, swimming, and trying to pretend the world was sane. For a while, it almost felt normal. There was laughter, smoke from the barbecue, some country playing from a Bluetooth speaker. My niece was drawing chalk dragons on the patio tiles. I thought maybe the worst had passed. It hadn't. Sometime around 10:30, I was walking back toward the house from the edge of the yard, a beer in one hand and a half-eaten burger in the other, when I noticed the water in the pool. It was off. The surface shimmered, but not like it should. There was a weird haze floating just under the lights. At first, I thought someone had dropped a towel in, or maybe a spilled drink had messed with the chlorine balance. But as I got closer, I caught the unmistakable stench. Sharp, chemical, brutal, chlorine. Not pool chlorine, industrial. I dropped the burger. Sam, I yelled, get the kids out, now. He didn't ask why. He just grabbed his two boys and shouted for my niece to run inside. I sprinted to the pool pump and hit the kill switch. The water had already started turning cloudy. The skimmer basket hissed like it was boiling. Then I saw the plastic container, half submerged at the shallow end. The label had peeled off, but I didn't need it. Someone had dumped high-concentration chlorine into my pool, enough to fry skin and lungs. 5 minutes later, I was watching the camera footage. The motion sensor had kicked in a few minutes after 10. A figure in a dark hoodie slipped in through the back fence, used bolt cutters on the chain. No mask. He walked like he belonged there, moved straight to the pool, popped the lid off the jug, and started pouring. By some miracle, I caught the tail end of it with my own damn eyes through the patio door. I grabbed a bat and a flashlight and ran out before the guy even finished emptying the container. Hey! I roared, charging across the yard like a lunatic. He dropped the jug and bolted, but didn't make it far. Sam came flying out the side door, tackled the bastard by the fire pit, and sat on him like a human paperweight while I called the cops. We had him, Robert Tile, member of the Sunridge Mesa HOA Security Patrol. Not even a real security guard, just a glorified hall monitor with a badge and a clipboard, and apparently, now, a chemical saboteur. When the police arrived, they tried to keep it procedural. I gave them the footage, explained the damage, and filed a criminal complaint. Robert, for his part, kept saying the same thing over and over. I was just performing my duty. HOA has rights to maintain common areas. The pool is not his. It's part of shared recreational zoning. I thought the officer was going to roll his eyes out of his skull. Sir, he said to Robert, this is not a shared area. This is private property, and you just committed a felony. But of course, it didn't stop there. The next morning, Barely 12 hours after the chlorine attack, I received a certified letter taped to my mailbox with surgical precision. It was from the Sunridge Mesa HOA legal team. Neatly typed gold-embossed letterhead, smelled faintly of white wine and repression. Inside was a formal notice of civil action. According to their filing, I had unlawfully constructed a non-compliant aquatic facility on what they referred to as disputed community acreage. Their claims were laughable, but dangerous. They accused me of building on common land without a permit, creating a public nuisance with gatherings, violating setback ordinances that didn't even apply to my zoning. They even included photocopied maps, crudely marked in pen, to demonstrate that my pool partially overlapped with HOA Greenbelt land. I flipped the pages with a sinking feeling in my gut. The final section hit like a brick. They were suing me, not for damages, but for possession. They were petitioning the court to grant them legal control over community property in contention, i.e., my damn pool and a third of my backyard. I called Ellen Graves, my attorney, before I even finished reading the letter. She picked up on the second ring. "I've been expecting your call," she said dryly. "You've seen it?" "Just got my copy. They're bluffing hard, but the paperwork's real. We're going to have to respond formally and fast." I sat down on my porch steps, the heat of the concrete soaking into my back. Across the wash, I could see Karen Walcroft standing at her upstairs window, arms folded, watching me like a vulture waiting for a flat tire. "Tell me something," I asked Ellen. "How the hell do you fight crazy this organized?" Her answer came without hesitation. "You out-document them, and then you burn their lies down in court." The courthouse smelled like industrial carpet and broken dreams. Ellen and I sat side by side in a cramped conference room with peeling linoleum floors and an ancient HVAC system that coughed every few minutes like it had something to say. She spread out the latest batch of documents in front of me: property maps, sale records, land surveys. Her finger tapped a yellowed map dated 2 years prior to my purchase. "This is what they attached to the lawsuit," she said. "Notice anything off?" I squinted. At first glance, it looked almost identical to the real survey I had, but then I saw it. The line marking my southern fence was shifted by about 20 feet, just enough to make it look like the pool and patio encroached into HOA green space. "They moved the boundary line," I muttered. "Digitally?" Ellen nodded grimly, clumsily, but enough to confuse someone who doesn't know what to look for. They used a doctored version of a pre-platting diagram that was never even finalized. And guess who certified it? She slid a second sheet toward me. Derek R. Fenley, P.E. The name rang a faint bell. Ellen caught my hesitation. Former county engineer, disbarred 3 years ago for falsifying easement records. HOA must have paid him under the table for this little performance. My stomach turned. It wasn't just pettiness anymore. This was fraud, intentional, systemic, and far beyond Karen's usual tantrum level. I took a breath. "Can we prove it?" "Oh, I intend to." Her smile was sharp enough to slice cinder blocks. We filed a motion that day for an emergency injunction to halt all legal actions against me until an independent land survey could be conducted. The judge approved it without blinking. Apparently, he'd seen one too many HOA soap operas to take anything at face value. Within the week, 2 neutral surveyors came out, guys with bad tans, laser scanners, and a healthy distrust of everyone. They took their time, measured everything, cross-referenced plats, municipal files, even aerial drone scans. When the results came in, it was like watching a demolition in slow motion. The pool, patio, and all adjacent structures were well within the original property boundaries filed during the sale. My parcel hadn't changed. What had changed was the HOA's evidence. Every document they submitted in court included slight but deliberate alterations. Some were digital, others hand-marked. The kicker: one of their files listed a boundary extension signed by a witness who had been dead for 4 years. Ellen handed me that file with a look that said, "We're going to destroy them." Meanwhile, the HOA wasn't done being creative. Karen called for an emergency community meeting at the Sunridge Mesa Clubhouse, a beige stucco box that looked like a dentist office and smelled like wet carpet. On the agenda, potential annexation of adjoining parcel for unified standards enforcement. I knew what that meant. They were going to try and vote me into the HOA against my will. Normally, that sort of forced inclusion wouldn't fly, but Karen, crafty snake that she was, had found a loophole. An old zoning memo from the early 2000s suggesting that adjacent properties with shared access routes could petition for annexation if a supermajority of HOA members approved. It was garbage, and it still required a 2/3 vote. I went. I went. I showed up in my best dusty work boots and a t-shirt that read, "No Karen Zone." Sat right in the front row. The place was packed. Maybe 30 people. Half of them retirees with permanent squint face. The other half young couples who looked like they only joined the HOA to get pool access and lawn service. Karen took the podium like she was announcing a military coup. "This motion is not about control," she declared. "It's about unity, about ensuring every property near Sunridge Mesa adheres to the same standards that keep our community desirable and safe." She never said my name, but everyone looked at me. When they opened the floor for discussion, I stood up. "I don't want your standards, I don't want your rules, and I sure as hell don't want your chemically inclined security goons swimming in my damn pool." Half the room laughed. The other half gasped like I'd exposed myself. In the end, the vote failed, 7 in favor, 5 against. Not even close. Karen didn't hide her disappointment. Her jaw tightened into that familiar death clamp, and she slammed the meeting gavel down so hard it cracked. But that night, things got worse. I woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of popping, not gunfire, more like fireworks. Then came the smell, burned plastic and meat. My outdoor kitchen, the pergola, the damn smoker I'd built from scratch. Flames roared up toward the mesquite tree as I stumbled outside in nothing but boxers and boots. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from my patio wall and sprayed until the tank sputtered dry. Then I used a garden hose until the fire department arrived 20 minutes later. The whole thing was torched. Gone. A total loss. The next morning, I checked the cameras. One of them was dead. The other 2 had partial footage. Someone in a hoodie and gloves scaling the fence carrying what looked like a fuel can. The video feed glitched just as they reached the kitchen. By the time the police arrived to collect the footage, the cloud backup was corrupted. Deliberate sabotage. I looked out over the scorched remains of what used to be my backyard paradise and felt something shift inside me. They wanted a war. They were damn well going to get one. I wasn't just angry now. I was radioactive. My outdoor kitchen charred. Thousands of dollars and years of weekend sweat gone in minutes. I could still smell the scorched cedar boards when I stood outside, boots crunching over blackened tile. This wasn't some HOA pissing match anymore. This was targeted, organized, and escalating fast. So I did what any self-respecting man with PTSD and a list of firefighter buddies would do. I called in reinforcements. 3 of my old crew, Tanner, Rudy, and Carl, showed up the next day with a truck full of tools, motion sensors, wildlife cams, and exactly 0 patience for suburban sabotage. "This is some Homeland Security level shit," Carl muttered as we mounted IR lights along the fence line. We spent 2 days turning my backyard into a miniature NORAD base. Hidden cameras under eaves, ground-level sensors near all entry points, one sensor even disguised as a gnome. It was beautiful. Meanwhile, Ellen had been busy. She brought in a private investigator, Jason Hills, former federal marshal with a face like concrete and the patience of a landmine. He showed up in jeans, cowboy boots, and a pressed polo like he was going to bust a cartel. First thing he said to me, "Don't speak to anyone from the HOA without me present. If Karen so much as blinks in your direction, I want a timestamp." Jason moved fast. Within 48 hours, he discovered that Sunridge Mesa had a private server physically located in Karen's garage. It hosted not just HOA documents, but surveillance footage from over a dozen hidden cameras placed throughout the neighborhood. None of it was declared or legal. They had maps, heat charts, annotated logs of non-compliant behavior. There was even a folder labeled Lucas Pool Parties with date-stamped stills of my guests by the fire pit. Jason's face when he saw that folder could have curdled blood. "Smile," he said. "You're their obsession." Meanwhile, the sabotage attempts didn't stop. One night, the motion sensor by the side gate lit up around 1:30 a.m. I checked the feed on my phone and caught 2 figures slipping through the fence, both wearing black hoodies, one of them carrying something that looked a hell of a lot like a stun gun. By the time I reached the yard, they were gone. But one of them had tripped a pressure mat under the gravel path. Jason checked the footage in the morning. One of them had a patch on their jacket. HOA Volunteer Patrol. Ellen filed a supplemental police report, attaching the footage and pointing out the electrical sabotage, the arson, the trespassing, and now, armed intrusion. But that's when the cops started getting squirmy. One officer actually said, "We don't want to escalate tensions in a tight-knit community. I nearly choked on my coffee. They dumped chlorine in my pool, torched my property, and broke into my yard with weapons." I snapped. "What, are you waiting for them to build a gallows on the lawn?" It didn't matter. Without an arrest, the sheriff's department was moving slower than a tortoise with a hangover, so Jason shifted tactics. He went public. He compiled a report, over 70 pages, detailing all the illegal surveillance, the fraudulent maps, the harassment complaints from other neighbors, and the patterns of HOA abuse dating back over 5 years. Then he leaked it. Not to the cops, to Nextdoor, Reddit, and the local news blog that lived for HOA drama. The response was nuclear. Comments flooded in. Former Sunridge Mesa residents told horror stories about Karen fining them for wind chimes and grilling on weekdays. One woman claimed Karen tried to evict her for painting her mailbox off-white instead of bone cream. Within 2 days, Hack-Free Lucas was trending on local Facebook groups. People started showing up outside Sunridge Mesa with signs that said things like "Private Land, Ho Land," and "Justice for the Grill." And then the real shift happened. HOA members started jumping ship. At least 4 households posted publicly that they were revoking their consent to enforcement policies and demanded an audit of the HOA's finances. One of them, an ex-board member, sent Ellen a sworn affidavit saying he'd personally witnessed Karen forging signatures on ballot initiatives. Ellen immediately filed for a judicial injunction to freeze HOA operations pending investigation. The county court approved the motion, and just like that, Sunridge Mesa was paralyzed. Karen tried to fight back. She issued a community newsletter, printed on glossy paper no less, calling me a hostile agitator backed by online mobs, and claiming the HOA was the victim of an orchestrated disinformation campaign. No one bought it. Especially not the cops, who finally decided to get off their asses when Ellen submitted the footage of the most recent break-in alongside the affidavit from the ex-board member. By the time they showed up at Karen's house with a search warrant, I had a lawn chair and a fresh beer ready. I didn't even say anything. I just waved. They knocked on Karen's door at 6 in the morning. Not gently either. I watched from my front yard as 3 county deputies and a digital crime specialist walked straight up to her beige stucco fortress and rang the doorbell like they meant it. She didn't answer, of course. She made them wait, then opened it wearing a silk robe and a face like expired mayonnaise. I couldn't hear everything from where I stood, but when they showed her the warrant and pushed past her into the house, I did hear her shriek something about constitutional overreach and community persecution. Didn't matter. They were in, and they weren't leaving empty-handed. The garage was the gold mine. Behind a row of holiday decorations and a stack of expired hurricane kits, they found it. The HOA's private server, set up on a reinforced shelf with a fan, battery backup, and a mess of network cables duct taped to a surge protector. Jason had been right. They seized it all. Drives, backups, even her damn router. I swear one deputy looked like he was fighting back a smirk the whole time. I would have baked him cookies if I hadn't still been dealing with the PTSD of a scorched brisket station. The real beauty came later that day when Jason cracked the server open and found the motherlode. Not only were there surveillance folders and altered documents, oh no, that would have been too easy. These people had chat logs, meeting notes, drafts of anonymous neighborhood complaints with metadata showing Karen as the author. There were even calendar reminders for tasks like verify motion trigger on Reynolds cam and check chlorine access, Home Depot receipt. She'd kept receipts. Ellen's face when she saw the evidence looked like she'd just found out Christmas came with a bonus check this year. "I'm filing charges within 24 hours, she said, and not just civil. We're talking criminal conspiracy, trespassing, property destruction, illegal surveillance, fraud, and obstruction." She wasn't exaggerating. That night, 2 more arrests followed. Robert Tile, again, and Clarence Waters, the HOA's treasurer, who apparently had been embezzling maintenance funds and authorizing Karen's spy tech shopping sprees. The 3rd arrest came later that week. Janine Porter, head of the Architectural Review Committee, was caught red-handed deleting files and forging backdated approval letters for phantom maintenance visits to my property. It was like watching a suburban mob movie unravel in real time. The final straw came when Jason connected the arson to a text thread between Karen, Robert, and Janine. One of them had messaged, "The fire pit is a safety hazard. Maybe it should be gone." The next message, a thumbs-up emoji and a lighter GIF. I swear to God. Ellen filed everything with the DA and requested the charges be elevated from misdemeanor harassment to felony counts under Arizona's racketeering statutes. The argument was clear. This wasn't a series of isolated incidents. It was organized HOA-sponsored crime. The judge agreed. Bail was set, ankle monitors were strapped on, and for the first time in months, my nights were quiet. No intrusions, no lights in the distance, just wind, stars, and the smell of new cedar planks I'd started stacking where my kitchen used to be. But I knew it wasn't over yet. The court moved our case to the Superior Court level. The charges were now public record. Local papers ran headlines like, "HOA president charged in suburban sabotage scheme. Private pool sparks criminal investigation. Man not in HOA tells HOA to shove it. HOA implodes." Okay, that last one was a meme someone sent me. But still, I knew Karen was going to fight it. She'd hired a lawyer with a hyphenated name and an expensive haircut. And despite the mounting evidence, she kept denying everything. Said the server was tampered with. Said she was the victim of digital misinformation warfare. But the best part? While all this unfolded, HOA operations were frozen. No fines, no meetings, no patrols. Sunridge Mesa was legally gagged, its leadership under indictment, and its finances frozen by court order. One of the neighbors who used to glare at me every time I mowed my lawn in cargo shorts brought over a peach cobbler as a peace offering. "I think I voted for the annexation thing," she whispered. I was wrong. Damn right she was. The courthouse felt different this time. Maybe it was the press outside. 2 vans, 4 microphones, and 1 guy live streaming in a lawn chair like he was tailgating the Super Bowl. Maybe it was the fact that half the courtroom gallery was filled with Sunridge Mesa residents who now looked at me not like the enemy, but like the guy who held the line when the rest of them blinked. Or maybe it was the expression on Karen's face when she walked in wearing a navy blue suit 3 sizes too stiff for her. She didn't look righteous anymore. She looked cornered. The state had decided to consolidate the cases. Criminal charges, trespassing, conspiracy, vandalism, arson, alongside the civil lawsuit the HOA had filed against me, which was still technically active. Karen had tried to delay the hearing 3 times. The judge finally denied her motions and set the trial for an accelerated review. No jury, just a bench trial. And our judge, Judge Halbert, 70-something, ex-Marine. No tolerance for bullshit. The trial opened with the HOA's claim that I had built unauthorized structures on community-managed green space. Their attorney, a smug little man named Langford with a Bluetooth in his ear and a briefcase full of lies, submitted the doctored maps, referenced ancient zoning laws, and tried to argue that my parcel was never properly divested from the original development plan. Ellen let him finish. Then she unloaded. She started with the official land deed, county records, GPS survey results, and drone scans that placed my property line exactly where I said it was. She backed it up with forensic analysis proving the HOA's maps were digitally altered. Then came the witness list. First, the ex-board member who confirmed Karen had manipulated votes and signatures. Second, Jason Hills, who presented recovered chat logs and activity timestamps showing coordinated attempts to sabotage my property, including the date and time the chlorine attack was planned. Then, my favorite moment, Ellen called the county fire marshal. He testified that the outdoor kitchen fire showed signs of accelerants and tampering. He used words like deliberate, targeted, and endangering neighboring structures. Langford objected. Judge Halbert overruled him with a wave. But the real death blow came when Jason presented the video footage we'd recovered. The HOA's attempt to wipe the cloud backups had failed. Jason had already mirrored the data across multiple secure servers. On screen, the court saw it all. Karen's patrol volunteers sneaking onto my property, the chemical container being poured into the pool, the arsonist climbing the fence with a gas can. Even the moment Robert Tile got tackled by Sam and whined like a wet chihuahua. Karen's face was stone. Langford tried to object again, claimed chain of custody, digital tampering, procedural missteps. Halbert stared him down like a drill sergeant. Counselor, do you believe this homeowner faked multiple years of harassment, falsified county records, and deep-faked half your client's HOA board for the sake of winning a zoning dispute over a pool? Langford swallowed. We, simply request that the video evidence be reviewed. Denied. That was the moment Karen cracked. Not loudly, not publicly, but you could see it. Her lips pressed white. Her hands trembled. When she stood to testify, her voice quivered for the first time. She blamed bad advice from former colleagues, claimed she never intended harm, said the surveillance was a community watch effort that got out of hand. Ellen let her hang herself for 15 straight minutes. Then the judge spoke. He started with the criminal counts, found Karen, Robert, and Janine guilty of trespassing, conspiracy to commit property damage, and illegal surveillance. Clarence, the treasurer, pled out 2 days earlier and turned state's witness, giving us even more damning material. Karen was sentenced to 6 months of house arrest, community service, and was barred from serving on any HOA board in the state. Robert and Janine? Fines and suspended jail time, pending completion of restitution and public apologies. Then came the civil judgment. The HOA's lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice. The judge declared my property fully private, outside of Sunridge Mesa jurisdiction, and protected by state-level property rights. And then he ruled on damages. The HOA was ordered to pay restitution for the destroyed kitchen, $80,000, compensation for legal costs, $52,000, emotional distress and invasion of privacy, $100,000, the HOA's reserve fund seized. Their operations suspended indefinitely, pending reformation. Karen didn't even wait to hear the full ruling. She stood up and walked out. The judge didn't stop her. He just banged the gavel and said, "Let the record show. Freedom still matters in Arizona." The courtroom erupted. I didn't cheer. I just exhaled for the first time in months. Outside, a few neighbors shook my hand. Louise, the old lady with the barky chihuahua, gave me a literal apple pie. One of the reporters asked, "Do you feel vindicated?" I looked out across the desert sky, the courthouse behind me, the whole mess finally cooling like a burned-out blaze. "Ask me when I rebuild," I said. The silence was the first thing I noticed. No buzzing drones overhead. No rustling in the flower beds at 2 a.m. No HOA volunteer wandering too close to my mailbox with a clipboard and a misplaced sense of power. Just wind, the buzz of cicadas, and the low splash of water as I skimmed leaves from the newly restored pool. The kitchen rebuild had taken 5 weeks. We used fire-resistant stone and steel this time. The smoker had been replaced with a bigger, better version, one that made my brisket come out so tender it nearly started a second religion in my neighborhood. Sam came by more often. Louise, too. The other neighbors, some from Sunridge Mesa, some from the older lots around the wash, started showing up with folding chairs and casserole dishes. They'd been scared before, but now they knew the monster had no teeth. No more HOA patrols, no more secret meetings. Karen's house had been sold. Quietly and well below market value. Rumor was she moved to Flagstaff, or New Mexico, or somewhere else with fewer witnesses. The Sunridge Mesa HOA was under full audit, with a court-appointed trustee combing through every email and bank statement. The board was gutted. A reform committee had formed, mostly made up of the same people who used to wave at me nervously and then duck when Karen glared. I didn't hate them. I understood fear, but I also knew what happened when no one stood up. The payout came through 3 weeks after the final judgment, $240,000, insurance and compensation combined. I used part of it to finish the guest house I'd been meaning to build for years. Something small, tucked behind the pergola, with a view of the mountains and the pool. I had a sign made for it, simple black letters on brushed aluminum. Private land, no HOA jurisdiction. Trespassers will swim with gators. There were no gators in Arizona. But no one tested the sign. The night I installed it, I lit the fire pit again for the first time since the arson. There was no ceremony, no speech, just a beer, a perfectly cooked steak, and the sound of my niece laughing as she tried to fish a marshmallow out of the pool with a broom handle. At one point, she looked up and asked, "Uncle Luke, is the war over now?" I didn't know how to answer that at first, but I looked around, at my land, my home, the people finally free to be neighbors instead of silent observers, and I nodded. "Yeah, kid," I said. "I'd say we won." And then I leaned back in my chair, watched the stars come out, and felt something I hadn't felt in months: stillness, peace, home.